I found a baby bracelet in my husband's drawer. It had the wrong initials. Hi, everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. They say you never really know someone until you see what they hide. I thought I knew my husband. I thought our marriage, despite its cracks, was built on honesty. I was wrong. My name is Elena Marshall, and this is the story of how a tiny plastic bracelet destroyed everything I believed about my life. We'd been trying for 6 years. 6 years of tracking ovulation, of scheduled intimacy that felt less like love and more like a clinical procedure, of waiting 2 weeks each month only to see that single line on the pregnancy test. 6 years of watching my body betray me month after month. David was patient at first. He'd hold me while I cried in the bathroom, whispering that it would happen, that we just needed to keep trying. But patience has a shelf life, and ours was expiring. The fertility clinics became our second home. Dr. Ashworth's office with its pale blue walls and motivational posters about miracles, the endless blood tests, hormone injections, ultrasounds that showed my empty womb in grainy black and white. Each failed IVF cycle cost us $15,000 and a piece of my soul. David started working late more often. Not suspicious late. He'd always been dedicated to his job at the medical supply company. But late enough that I'd eat dinner alone, scrolling through social media filled with pregnancy announcements and baby photos. Late enough that the space between us in bed grew wider. "It's just a stressful time at work," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "New contracts, inventory issues. It'll calm down soon." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him because the alternative was admitting that my inability to give him a child was pushing him away. On our 10th wedding anniversary, David surprised me with a weekend trip to the coast. It was beautiful sunset walks on the beach, expensive wine, his hand in mine like old times. For 3 days, we didn't talk about fertility or treatments or the adoption agencies we'd started researching. We just existed together. "I love you, Elena," he said on our last night there, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "No matter what happens, I love you." I cried into his shoulder, believing those words with every fiber of my being. How naive I was. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in October. David had texted saying he'd be late again. Another shipment delay. I'd taken the day off work because my body was still recovering from our most recent failed IVF attempt, the 4th one, and I couldn't face my colleagues' pitying glances. I was putting away laundry, trying to find purpose in mundane tasks, when I opened David's dresser drawer to return some socks. That's when I saw it. A small Ziploc bag tucked under his undershirts. Inside was a baby hospital bracelet. My heart stopped. For a moment, I let myself believe it was for me, that he'd been optimistic enough to buy something for a baby that didn't exist yet. But when I pulled it out with trembling fingers, I saw the truth. The bracelet was worn, clearly used. It had tiny letters stamped into the plastic. AME. Not David's initials. Not mine. Not anyone I knew. My hands shook as I examined it. It was real. A genuine hospital bracelet from Mercy General, the same hospital where we'd done some of our fertility treatments. There was a date stamped on it. March 14th, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I'd been in that hospital. I'd had a hysteroscopy to check for uterine abnormalities. I'd been there for 3 days due to complications. David had been so attentive during that time, barely leaving my side. Or so I thought. I heard his key in the lock and quickly shoved the bracelet back into the bag, placing it exactly where I'd found it. My mind raced. There had to be an explanation. A reasonable explanation. "Hey, honey," David called from the hallway. "I brought Thai food. Your favorite." I walked out to meet him, my face a mask of normalcy even though my heart was hammering. "Great. I'm starving." We ate dinner. We watched television. We went through the motions of a normal evening while that bracelet burned in my consciousness like a brand. At midnight, after David had fallen asleep, I went back to his drawer. This time, I looked more carefully. Behind the socks, I found a small notebook, dates and times, cryptic notes that meant nothing to me. Appointments marked only with initials, addresses I didn't recognize, and photographs. Printed photographs, not digital, harder to trace, I supposed. A blurry image of a hospital hallway, a woman's hand holding a document I couldn't read clearly, and one photo that made my blood freeze. A newborn baby, wrapped in a hospital blanket, with that same bracelet visible on its tiny wrist. I waited 3 days before saying anything. 3 days of watching my husband, looking for signs I'd missed. The way he kept his phone face down. How he'd started a new habit of taking walks in the evening, always with his phone. The locked drawer in his office that I'd never questioned before. On Friday night, I put the bracelet on the kitchen table where he'd see it immediately. His face went white when he walked in. "Where did you get that?" His voice was too controlled, too careful. "From your drawer, while I was putting away laundry." I kept my voice steady. "Want to tell me whose initials those are?" David sat down heavily, running his hand through his hair. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He was quiet for a long moment. "It belonged to my colleague's baby, Jim from accounting. His daughter passed away from SIDS. He gave me the bracelet to donate to a charity that makes memory jewelry for bereaved parents. I forgot it was in there." The lie was smooth, practiced. If I hadn't already spent 3 days investigating, I might have believed him. "Jim doesn't work in accounting," I said quietly. "You don't have a colleague named Jim." And I called Mercy General. They don't have any charity partnerships for memory jewelry. His expression shifted just slightly, but I saw it. Fear. "Elena, you're stressed from the treatments. You're reading into things that aren't there." "Then explain the photos, the notebook, the addresses." "What photos? What are you—" He stood up abruptly. "Did you go through my things?" "Answer the question, David." "You had no right—" "Whose baby is in that bracelet?" My scream echoed through our kitchen. David stood frozen, and in that moment of silence, I saw something crumble in his eyes. Not guilt, not shame, terror. "I can't tell you," he whispered. "You can't or you won't?" "Both." I stared at my husband, this man I'd loved for 12 years, and realized I didn't know him at all. "Then I'll find out myself," I said, and walked out of the kitchen. I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who hired a private investigator, a middle-aged woman named Rachel Chen, who asked no questions and delivered answers efficiently. Someone who tracked her husband's car using a GPS device. Someone who lied to friends and family about why I looked so exhausted, so haunted. The first breakthrough came when Rachel followed David to a building on the east side of the city. Not his office, not a bar, or a gym. A small medical clinic called New Hope Reproductive Services. He went in for 20 minutes, Rachel told me, showing me time-stamped photos. Handed someone an envelope, left without checking in at the front desk. I did my research. New Hope had been the subject of a lawsuit 3 years ago. Allegations of mishandling embryos, of mixing up biological samples. The case had been settled out of court, buried under non-disclosure agreements and payouts. But the online reviews told a different story. Couples claiming their babies didn't look like either parent. Questions about genetic testing that didn't match. One review that had been quickly deleted but captured by archive sites. They gave us someone else's child and covered it up. My hands trembled as I read that line over and over. The second breakthrough came from the notebook I'd photographed. Rachel helped me decode the addresses. They were all connected to adoption agencies, lawyers specializing in reproductive law, and one private residence in a suburb 40 minutes away. "Want me to check it out?" Rachel asked. "No," I said. "I'll do it myself." The house was modest, well kept, with children's toys in the yard. I sat in my car across the street for 2 hours before anyone emerged. When the door finally opened, I saw her, a woman about my age, pushing a stroller. And in that stroller was a little girl, maybe 2 years old, with dark curly hair. My dark curly hair, David's nose, my mother's chin. I couldn't breathe. The woman walked past my car and I saw the child's face clearly. She was laughing at something, her tiny hands reaching for a toy. I sat frozen until they disappeared around the corner, then I threw up in the parking lot. That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a hotel and called Rachel. I need everything, I told her. Phone records, financial statements, medical records if you can get them. Everything about my husband and that clinic. It took a week, the longest week of my life. Rachel worked faster than I thought possible, utilizing contacts and methods I didn't ask about. What she uncovered was worse than anything I'd imagined. The financial records showed regular payments from David to New Hope, not for fertility treatments, but labeled as consulting fees. $50,000 over 2 years. His phone records showed dozens of calls to a Dr. Marcus Reeves, the same doctor who'd been named in the lawsuit but never charged. The same doctor who'd handled one of my egg retrievals 2 years ago. And then Rachel found the medical records. I need you to sit down for this, she said when she came to my hotel room. Her face was grim. Elena, 2 years ago, during your hysteroscopy procedure, you were under anesthesia for 7 hours. Your file says there were complications, that they had to do additional repairs. But I had a friend in medical coding look at the billing. There's a gap. Procedures that were performed but not documented in your official record. What procedures? An emergency C-section and a live birth. The room tilted. That's impossible. I would have known. They told you it was complications from the surgery, kept you sedated. When you woke up, you were recovering from what you thought was a hysteroscopy, but your body had actually delivered a baby. No. I shook my head violently. No, that's insane. David was there. He would have known. He would have told me. Rachel's silence was answer enough. He knew, I whispered. He knew and he... What? What did he do with my baby? That's what we need to find out. I confronted David that night. Not at home, I met him at his office where he couldn't escape, couldn't hurt me if this went wrong. Tell me about March 14th, 2 years ago, I said without preamble. He looked up from his computer and I watched him calculate whether to lie or confess. Elena, I can explain. Tell me about my baby. His face crumbled. How did you... The baby, David. Where is my baby? He closed his office door, locked it, and sank into his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. She was dying, he said. The baby. Your baby. She was born premature, not breathing properly. Dr. Reeves said she had maybe hours. They told me I could let her die, or I could save her and save you. What does that mean? There was another couple. They'd paid for a surrogacy, but their surrogate had a stillbirth. They were desperate, wealthy, and willing to pay anything for a healthy baby. Dr. Reeves. He proposed a solution. I felt sick. He gave them my baby. He saved her life. The other couple had access to specialists, to equipment that we couldn't afford. She needed immediate surgery, round-the-clock care. She was my baby. And she would have died. David stood up, his face twisted with guilt and defensiveness. I had to choose. I chose to save her life, even if it meant losing her. Even if it meant lying to you. You let me think I could never have children. You let me go through years of torture, of blaming my body, when all along I'd already had a baby. When all along she was alive. I protected you, he said, but there was no conviction in his words. The bracelet, I said, my voice deadly calm. The initials, AME. Those are my initials backwards. Ashworth, Marshall, Elena. Someone wanted me to know. Who was it? David's face went pale. I don't know. Liar. I swear, Elena, I don't know who put that bracelet in my drawer. I found it there a month ago. I've been trying to figure out who knows. Maybe it was someone with a conscience. Maybe it was someone who couldn't live with what you all did. I stood up, moving toward the door. I want her back. You can't. The adoption was legal. The couple, they're her parents now. If you try to fight this, you'll destroy that little girl's life. You already destroyed mine. I left him there, in his office, with his justifications and his guilt. I found out who sent the bracelet 2 days later. It was Dr. Reeves's nurse, Catherine A., woman who'd quit the clinic shortly after my procedure. She'd been carrying the guilt for 2 years, and when she heard I was still going through fertility treatments, still suffering, she couldn't stay silent anymore. I'm sorry, she told me when we met at a coffee shop. I should have said something sooner, but I was scared of losing my license, of Dr. Reeves coming after me. The things that man did, the babies he moved around like inventory. Yours wasn't the only one. There were others? She nodded, tears in her eyes. At least a dozen that I know of. Failed IVF patients who were sedated and had emergency C-sections they never knew about. Babies given to couples with money. Dr. Reeves made millions. Where is he now? Still practicing. Still protected by lawyers and NDAs and people too scared to speak up. I looked at this woman who'd finally found her courage, and I made my decision. I went to the police with everything. Rachel's evidence, Catherine's testimony, my medical records with their suspicious gaps. I gave them the address of the house where my daughter was living. I gave them David's financial records showing his complicity. The investigation took 3 months. 3 months of hell, of depositions, of facing David across courtrooms while he claimed he'd only been trying to save our baby's life. 3 months of being painted as an unstable woman who couldn't accept her infertility. But the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Reeves was arrested on 14 counts of fraud, illegal adoption practices, and assault. New Hope Reproductive Services was shut down. David was charged as an accessory. And the couple who'd been raising my daughter, the Hendersons, they were cleared of any wrongdoing. They genuinely believed they were adopting legally through a surrogacy arrangement. They were victims, too. The court had to decide what happened to my daughter. Her name was Amy. The Hendersons had named her Amy Margaret Henderson. She was 2.5 years old with my eyes and David's smile, and she didn't know I existed. The family court judge was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. This is an impossible situation, she said during the final hearing. A child's entire life has been built on a lie, but that doesn't mean we can simply tear her away from the only parent she's known. She's my daughter, I said, my voice breaking. I never consented to giving her up. I didn't even know she existed. I understand, Ms. Marshall, but Amy Henderson is not a possession to be returned. She's a little girl who deserves stability. The judge's ruling was this. I would be granted visitation rights, increasing gradually. The Hendersons would retain custody, but I would be legally recognized as Amy's biological mother. When Amy was old enough to understand, she would be told the truth, and she could decide what role she wanted me to play in her life. It wasn't justice. It wasn't what I'd dreamed of for 6 years of trying to become a mother. But it was something. David went to prison for 3 years. Dr. Reeves got 15. New Hope's assets were liquidated to provide compensation to the families affected. I divorced David while he was awaiting trial. I didn't visit him in prison. I didn't read his letters. The first time I met Amy was in a supervised playroom with a child psychologist present. She was shy, clutching a stuffed rabbit, looking at me like I was a stranger. Because I was. Hi, Amy, I said, kneeling down to her level. My name is Elena. She studied me with those eyes. My eyes, and said, You look sad. I laughed through tears. Maybe a little, but I'm happy to meet you. Okay, she said, and went back to playing with blocks. The Hendersons were stiff with me at first, understandably. Their lives had been destroyed too. The knowledge that their daughter had been stolen from another mother, that their joy had been built on someone else's nightmare. But over time, as the months turned into a year, we found an uneasy peace. Jennifer Henderson was a good mother, loving, patient, everything I'd dreamed of being. Her husband Tom was kind, if distant. They didn't have to let me into Amy's life beyond what the court ordered, but slowly they did. "She asks about you," Jennifer told me one day as we watched Amy play at a park. "She knows you're special, even if she doesn't understand why yet." "Thank you," I whispered, "for letting me know her." "She's your daughter too," Jennifer said quietly. "I can't imagine what you've been through. I wouldn't survive it." We sat in silence, two mothers of the same child, bound together by a terrible crime. I still have the bracelet AME, my initials in reverse, a message from a woman brave enough to tell the truth. Sometimes I hold it and think about all the choices that led to this moment. David's choice to save our baby by giving her away. Dr. Reeves's choice to play God with people's lives. Catherine's choice to finally speak up. And my choice to fight, to expose the truth, even though it meant I couldn't have the fairy tale ending I'd always imagined. I wouldn't raise Amy from birth. I wouldn't be the one she called mom. I wouldn't have those first words, first steps, first days of school. But I would have something. Last month, Amy turned 3. The Hendersons invited me to her birthday party, a small gathering in their backyard with balloons and cake and children running around. Amy ran up to me, her face covered in frosting, and grabbed my hand. "Elena, come see my new bike." And as she pulled me across the lawn, chattering about training wheels and streamers, I felt something shift inside me. Not healing. It was too soon for that. Maybe it would always be too soon. But hope. 3 years ago, I thought I couldn't have children. 2 years ago, I had a baby and didn't even know it. 1 year ago, I discovered the truth and watched my world burn down. Today, I'm holding my daughter's hand. It's not the story I wanted to write. It's not the motherhood I dreamed of. But it's mine. Imperfect, broken, and hard-won. And I will fight for every moment of it. They never found out who put the bracelet in David's drawer. Catherine swore it wasn't her. She'd planned to tell me directly. The clinic's records didn't show anyone accessing that information. It remained a mystery. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it was David himself. If some part of him, buried beneath the lies and the justifications, couldn't live with what he'd done. If he'd left that bracelet there, hoping I'd find it. Hoping I'd discover the truth. Because he was too much of a coward to tell me himself. I'll never know. What I do know is this. Secrets have weight. They bend and break the people who carry them. David carried his for 2 years before it destroyed him. And me? I'm learning to live with the truth, heavy as it is. Because the truth, no matter how painful, is still lighter than a lie. Amy is 4 now. She knows I'm her birth mother. She doesn't fully understand what that means yet. But she will someday. And when that day comes, I'll be there to answer her questions. I'll tell her about the bracelet, about the woman who was brave enough to reveal the truth. I'll tell her that sometimes love means fighting for someone, even when the whole world says to give up. I'll tell her that she was wanted, so desperately wanted, before she was even born. And I'll tell her that every day, every single day, I'm grateful for the mystery bracelet that led me to her. Even though it broke my heart to find it. Even though learning the truth cost me everything. Because now, when I look at my daughter's face, her smile, her laugh, the way she scrunches her nose when she's thinking, I see not what was stolen, but what I fought to reclaim. Not a possession, not a prize, but a person. My person, my daughter. And that, finally, is enough.